Trump has gone through a pretty deliberate filtering process where 2018, 2020, 2022, we saw wave after wave after wave of moderate Republicans being primaried by Trump-endorsed candidates, and a lot of them ended up losing their general elections. But hey, in terms of the Republicans left around, the proportion of them that are like really crazy MAGA conservatives is a lot higher. And so I totally agree with you, Pisco. I think there's very little room for sort of anti-Trump Republicans in the Senate or the House anymore. I think literally I'll say the two structural exceptions would be the senator from Maine or the senator from Alaska.
Yeah.
Because
they're categories
they have
of their own. Yeah.
Collins. Yeah.
Because they have ranked choice voting, right? I think that's the reason that you'll see maybe room for moderate senators from those states. But I think that in pretty much every other state, I don't think that this is a problem that will be alleviated anytime soon.
There's a bit of a Manchin thing going on here too with Maine, and Maine, Susan Collins is a bit of a known commodity. They know her and they like her. Even liberal people in Maine like Susan Collins, which is weird to me, especially given how she voted and some of the Supreme Court nominees and what happened later with Roe v. Wade. But yeah, it's still the case.
Well,
I'm sure if you polled Maine, they like her. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right-wingers have been trying to primary Lisa Murkowski for like 15 years now, and they haven't really been able to succeed. Yeah. And so, especially with the ranked choice voting, I mean, Alaska has a Democrat in the House representing them, right? And so ranked choice voting really does help, I would say, at least in our current environment, like moderate the type of candidates. And those are just the two states that have it. And so, yeah, I think I agree. And I don't know what happens after Trump. If Trump decides, if Trump wins, it's only going to get worse. But if Trump loses in 2024, I don't know if the Republican Party will.
I don't think there's a pivot coming.
I don't think it'll. Yeah, I think maybe 2032 or something. Like at some point it'll happen because they're going to get 40% of the vote in an election and decide they just have to at some point. But
this is the thing. The GOP is not an introspective party, because this is the thing that frustrates me. I mean, I'm not saying that some sort of epiphany is impossible. But to me, it's breathtaking that it hasn't happened yet, because Trump won via the Electoral College, which is a legitimate win, but there's no mandate associated with Trump and Trumpism. He lost the popular vote to Secretary Clinton by 3 million votes, won by the Electoral College. Then he lost in 2018. He lost in 2020, 2021 with the Senate runoffs. He lost in 2022, 2023. So it has been one L after another. And so that's, I'll be on a WIC panel sometime this week talking about, is Trump good for the Republican Party? Objectively speaking, he's been terrible for it. If you want to hang your hats on appointing those 3 Supreme Court justices, but that was McConnell and the Federalist Society. That had nothing to do. You could have put any Republican in Trump's position and they would have rubber stamped whatever appointment there.
But he's playing a different game than you. He's not playing the game of general election wins. He's playing the game of primary wins. He's playing the game of winning and dominating the Republican Party.
Yeah, but the problem is you still have to win the general, and Trump's under Trump, the Republican Party's record with that respect has been awful. And so that's the thing. It's like, that's where the GOP's epiphany, the fact that it's taken this long and hasn't happened yet, is really embarrassing. That's why when people say, well, it's got to happen.
You mean for the non-Trumpers who do care about winning and being
sure.
Yeah, okay.
Well, quite frankly, even for the Trumpers as well, right? Okay, like this is even for the Trumper, the MAGA Republican. I don't know why the fuck you care about winning a primary if you don't win the general. The primary doesn't get you the office that you're seeking. So who gives a shit, right? So if I'm a MAGA Republican and I just nail the primary, but I lose to a moderate Democrat in the general, I still lost. The Democrats won, I lost. And so there's no matter how you slice it, the inevitable road, at least so far, the record has reflected that it's just been one defeat after another.
Unless you don't have a preference as between a moderate deep state Republican and a moderate deep state Democrat, which I don't think is true of all MAGA, but I think it's true of some significant portion of MAGA. They have an indifference. They view
uniparty.
They view it as a uniparty, part of the same swamp. And so if you're, I don't really care if Mitt Romney or Joe Biden wins the election, because to me, they're two sides of the same coin.
I think that the issue is that the reason I do say it's going to come to a head at some point is because I don't really see a reason to believe that the demographics of the country will become substantially more favorable or remain the same for Republicans, even going into the next decade, right? So, I think what I mean by that is when you look at the sort of political ideological bend of each generation, it seems like millennials and Gen Zers particularly are almost like stubbornly left-leaning, right? Where millennials are not becoming more they're becoming slightly more conservative in the sense that they're becoming like far left Democrats. Now they're moderate Democrats, but they're not becoming literally conservatives like Gen Xers and boomers have done at the same ages. and that these curves are seriously discontinuous. Part of that could be growing up during the Great Recession. Part of that could be growing up during the Tea Party movement. Part of that could be growing up during Obama. And Obama was such a inspirational political figure for so many young millennials at the time, right? I'm not really sure. But the point is that seems to be the case. And I think especially in 10 years when you have like so many more boomers pass away and such a higher proportion of the voting base is going to be millennials, like I think at some point there will be a presidential election where Democrats win 58% of the vote, win 60 Senate seats, win 300 seats in the House, and literally pass like every conceivable Democratic priority. And the Republicans literally take such a fat L that they just have to change. They either face electoral annihilation or they have to change. And I don't know if that's 2032. I don't know if it's 2036, but it just seems like the demographics of the country just simply will not allow for this type of ideology to go forward into the future unless we see the younger generation like basically all of a sudden become substantially more conservative than they are now, which they just aren't trending in that direction. So
yeah, so real quick, I want to answer this question. Josiah, are you sure that he's objectively bad? How do you know the results wouldn't have been worse with another flag bearer? The reason that I think it's reasonable to conclude that Trump has been electoral poison for the GOP is because when you control, like you take his endorsements. So Trump makes lots of endorsements, but if you don't count incumbents and you count endorsements that Trump makes that are non-incumbent and deviate from what the establishment Republican Party recommend in terms of endorsements, Trump had a very high loss rate for candidates that he endorsed. Then you see as well with like more moderate Republicans doing reasonably well in swing districts. You have 18 relatively moderate Republicans in districts that President Biden won. So the general principle is, at least in this election, the past few election cycles, is more moderate Republicans do better in the general election than MAGA Trump Republicans. I don't know. The Arizona race hasn't been decided yet, but you have Kari Lake, who was endorsed by Trump. She lost the gubernatorial race, and she's favored to lose the senatorial race too. She was favored to lose it in a three-way with Kyrsten Sinema as the incumbent independent. But now that Sinema is out of the race and it's a 1v1, she's favored to lose that as well. MAGA as a general principle just does not do well in general elections. And I'm not saying don't take it seriously. I'm just saying that this idea that he pitches himself as this reinvigorator of the GOP. In certain respects, he is, but in terms of winning elections, no, he's not.